Hello, friends. Welcome to the Art of Inquiry. You're with Stacey James of Pioneer Your Life and Adrienne of She Rose and Shenanigans. So this week we're going to be talking about essential questions, how to really explore that topic in your own life to find deeper wisdom so that you can live the best life possible. So today, dig in with us, grab some tea, whatever you need, just get cozy, sit back, relax. Feel free to close your eyes and just explore as we explore today and join us on the journey. Adrienne, hello.
Yes, hello. Hello. How are you?
So, I'm doing well this week. It has been it's been a tough week, as you know, behind the scenes. Some very real life circumstances have brought up some big things for me in my own life, and so I think this is a critical juncture. We are kind of already planning on having this topic, but it's always interesting to explore how the universe aligns with the things that we say yes to in our life, right?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes without really thinking through what we wanted.
Yeah, indeed.
It's been a rough week for me as well, but that's what full moons bring on. So
there you go. Yeah.
Yep.
Into that energy. It's wild you bringing up the moon. For a period of time, particularly when I was doing all the soul-inspired wellness stuff, I never pursued that information per se, but I was around all the women who not only pursued that information and interacted with that information, but a lot of them who espoused it as well. So I was very familiar with what was going on, and I was always, not surprised, but pleasantly amused by how much, as they would say, this is what it's about. And I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's exactly what I'm experiencing.
Right.
So that makes so much sense. So I always appreciated that, and I always appreciated the knowledge. But I have always been kind of one of these pioneers, if you will. It's no surprise that Pioneer Your Life is what came up in this next round of business for me. Because I think at some level I really enjoy the idea of just kind of shutting down all the outside noise and filters and experiencing life and exploring life. And then once I have a good grasp on who or what I am in that moment in time period, then opening it up to see what resonates on the outside world in terms of, the moon cycles or the period and some of the experiences that we're having in the world at large, and just being like, oh, that's interesting. We can correlate the energy going on a bigger level here. So that's always kind of fun to do.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dabble in.
But today, kind of getting back on track, what we are really wanting to help people kind of on that same vein of thoughts or feelings is getting people to not shut down outside sources, because resources outside of yourself are important. They're not just important, they are critical. They're essential to your ability to maintain objective perspectives and be able to enhance your life and your experience. So we're not saying shut that down completely. However,
no, education is necessary.
Absolutely. What we are talking about today, though, is that essential question. So how do you get to a place inside yourself where you can really dig in and you can recognize when you hit your limitations, where you go from there? How do you navigate the spaces that really trip you up in life? And that's really what we're talking about today, is how you break through those spaces using these essential questions.
Yeah, and I think it's important just to add that while resources are necessary, if they're not applied within, they don't work. You actually have to work the resource, and that resource has to be applied within and worked.
Indeed. Integration of the principle or the idea, because if it remains just an idea or that thing that is offered outside, it never actually becomes part of your reality, part of your experience.
Right.
So that's really
and that's really where, that's where the healing really happens. Based off of the resources, it happens from within. So, my personal go-to on this is one question. It starts all other questions for me, and that question is this working? Whatever I'm doing, is it working? Is it working that I feel good, that I feel whole, that I feel fulfilled doing it? Is it working for how I'm leading other people? Is it working within my family, within my friendships? Is this working? If it's not working, then it provides me a moment to number one, reflect on maybe what is not working, and then provides me the opportunity to formulate something new that will work. So that for me is my go-to question when I find myself in any kind of realm or time of really missing the present moment.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite sayings for myself is course correction. It's a version of asking that question, but you're like, dang, is this time, is it requiring some course correction here?
Right.
Anytime because I rewind, let's rewind back a few years, probably more like almost a decade at this point. But there was such a time where I remember in my early 20s, there was just this kind of perpetual chatter undertone to my entire life experience. So everything that I was doing, there was that critical inner voice that was questioning it, or was shaming self, or was saying, you idiot, you're supposed to turn left and you turn right, you're stupid, whatever it was.
Right.
It was that incessant chatter that always had commentary about what was going on.
Right.
And I remember one of my goals, probably about 6 years ago, when Soul Inspired was really first coming about, was how do I mute the mental chatter? How do I really get this to a place where I am still present in self and the choices that I'm making right now, that I can eliminate that inner dialogue that is really a nuisance, for lack of a better word. So I started to kind of break down my experience and explore it a little bit in terms of I started to really listen to that voice, not just in like a noise in the backdrop, but I really started to be curious about what those voices were actually saying, why
they were showing up.
Yeah, and then I would kind of start having an inner dialogue with the inner dialogue, and
right.
Whoa, why did you just say that? That wasn't very nice. Why would you say that to yourself? Like, okay, you made a wrong turn, no problem. And started to just get curious about what part of myself was driving that. And so as I became friends with that inner dialogue, I was able to kind of deconstruct it. And I didn't ever mute it. It wasn't about muting it, but what it was about was resolving it, or retraining the brain to think a certain way, or to converse a certain way, or experience life a certain way. But it took going through this process of really getting friendly with what it was and being curious. So I think that today, what we're talking about is that curiosity to learn more about your own experience first and foremost, because we're not going to change a thing about ourselves trying to change someone else, ever.
Right.
Period. Yeah. Not going to happen. Dream on. Keep going that route if you want. Hopefully you'll course correct at some point down the road and find a more efficient path, which is yourself.
Right. Yeah, and this is an ancient study. This is, Socrates, Plato, this is something that has happened for years. And one of the things that I think is really important is to actually kind of get into those open-ended questions, those Socratic questions, which really delve into, why am I feeling this? Why am I thinking this? Why are you here? What are you trying to tell me? Kind of a thing. and do have that inner dialogue with your own self at the same time. But it's important to kind of start to really realize and know what are those Socratic questions, because sometimes when we sit there and we ask, why am I doing this? It's very easy to find something extremely circumstantial in the moment and kind of blame that and go, well, I'm doing this because I'm stuck in traffic, where it might be actually coming from somewhere deeper, and usually some sort of memory or some sort of trigger or something like that. So it is important to kind of go beyond what might be the first answer sometimes, and really have a deep listening involved. One of the things when I talk to people about listening to the answers of those is that a lot of times the first answer, and I'm talking about the deep one, like the very first absolute split second one, which is, well, I'm doing this because I'm hurt. That's a lot of times one that is passed over, where the brain goes, no, that's not the reason. It's because of the traffic. It's kind of passed. That first one is so quick that it's very easily passed over, and then our mind finds a way to justify it. And I think that is something that it's important to realize that one, we're spiritual beings living in a human body, and that body is designed to make meaning out of things. And so if you let it run on default, it will find any circumstance or interaction and create the meaning of that as this is why it's happening, versus kind of going back and delving a little bit deeper into history or any kind of trauma we've gone through or any kind of choice that we've made that we feel personally responsible for, and actually acknowledging that is where it's really possibly most likely coming from. And that the making of the meaning of the function of the body and the system of it is going to happen automatically. So it's important to kind of bypass that and say, no, that's more of a circumstantial thing. Something else is going on deeper, and I need to ask more involved questions and listen as quietly as possible, and really say, what do I need? What is it that I'm needing to hear at this moment?
Yeah. And I think as you're talking about more involved questions, I don't think that those need to be any more complex than necessary. I think it's a very simple question, in the moment. And ultimately kind of, to come back around to what I was saying just a moment ago, what allowed me to mute the chatter, or like I said earlier, it wasn't a muting of it, it was actually an integration of self. It was me allowing myself to be so present with all the layers of who I have been and who I continue to grow into, that I'm just here with me all the time. So there's no running dialogue behind the dialogue, because it's all just me here now. And that took years of, the whole onion thing, years of sloughing off the layers to get to the point where I was present with self and in self. And today, for the most part, and for several years now, I've had the pleasure of being in relationship with self at such a level that I feel like I don't have a lot of the chatter. And any time the chatter shows up, I've gotten to a place where I can find a lot of comfort in being curious about it, and not denying it or resisting it, but rather, welcoming it, truly welcoming it, and saying, oh, hey, what are you doing here? Hi, Oprah. What do we miss? What do you have to say? I'm here for you. I love you. I welcome you. Let's get through this together and move on, because I'm really enjoying my life in an integrated way. Right. So, I think that... Yeah, to co-create. Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of building on our conversation with those of us who joined us last week, as we learn to ask these essential questions and be more present in ourselves as we're unraveling and getting to the root of everything that is, that's inhibiting our growth or disallowing us to move forward in the ways that we want, or expand in the ways that we want, or create in the ways that we want. I think that what we find is, as we take that on and as we move forward and as we get better at asking these questions and acknowledging the experience that we're actually having, we grow stronger in that. And we just, it gives us more energy, more life force, more of that deep root, that protection that we were kind of talking about last week. It allows us to really embolden ourselves to be a bigger, brighter version. And that's pretty radical.
Yeah. I want to step back real quick because while I was listening to you, I realized that I wanted to point out, I want you to know I did not say evolved questions, involved questions that require involvement of yourself to answer them in order to evolve. So keeping the questions simple is absolutely required, because you don't want to get to the point where you're trying to make up these completely crazy questions. You want to keep the conversation simple within yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what am I feeling today? Or, you know, and I guess the conversation that we're trying to offer people today is giving an example of some of these questions, right? And ultimately, where, you know, what I have seen in my own life and some of the people I've worked with over the years and friendships and family members is that as I have gotten better about inquiring with myself, it allows us to be better communicators, which by nature enhances the relationships that we have in our lives, in our professional space, in our personal space, in our interpersonal spaces, with our children, with our friends, you know, all of the people. So, you know, part of being able to dig in with self and really check in and get the temperature of you and your life at that moment is it allows us to be reflective. And this is really imperative if it's being able to be nimble and being able to move and ebb and flow with life as it comes at you, because, you know, with the weeks that we just had, it would have been really easy to crumble. I mean, it would have been really easy to crumble and throw the towel in and just, you know, I'm out. Enough. No more. You know, but when we can get to this place where maybe we have a moment of that, I certainly had a moment with you where I'm like, whoo-wee, man, I'm having a hard time finding trust and faith and flow in this moment. Because that doesn't make any sense to me at this moment. But once I acknowledged that and had that, I was able to come back to a place of exploration. Okay, so if this is the reality and this is where we are now, where do we go from here? And start unraveling it with those essential questions. Where do we course correct?
Yeah.
How?
What is your go-to question?
You know, I don't think I have a go-to question. The reality of my life is I've over the years had so many people ask me what some of my rituals and routines are, and I kind of always smile and laugh, and I'm like, well, it's whatever it is that day, because I am a pretty intuitive, freely flowing spirit, and you know, ritual for me anymore includes self-care. And what does self-care mean? Every day self-care means something different. It might mean getting up and making sure I take some time to take some tea or some coffee and sit there. Self-care may include a practice of moving meditation on my yoga mat. It may include any number of other things. So I think the question for me usually is, what do I need now? What do I need in this moment? Do I need to move my body? Do I need to write something down? Do I need to say something? Do I need to acknowledge something? Do I need to drop down to my knees and feel it? And So I think that's where, when I'm looking at essential questions, it's usually really rooted in the now. I was speaking with a friend the other night, and I was remembering Garth from Wayne's World, you know, live in the now, man, live in the now. You really just gotta be present. You've gotta be able to know how to just ask yourself what is happening here, not trying to correlate it right away, not trying to assign it like you were saying earlier, sitting in the car in traffic, trying to default to this or that, or assign it something, but just be curious of what's happening now. What do you need right now in this moment? And sometimes it's just a drink of water or a breath.
Right. Yeah. Well, and there's different types of questions. I know that, you know, like I said, my go-to, by the way, speaking of rituals, that's the cool part about rituals and dogma is that you get to make it up, you know. A lot of religions have made it up for you, but it doesn't work for everybody, so you get to make it up. And I've got mine. I don't necessarily do my ritual, the same ritual every day. I'm kind of like you, where it kind of flows, but I also know that if there are days when I'm having bad or heavy days, you know, where I'm not feeling good, then I do have a very set ritual that I go, okay, I need to start, you know, like this isn't working, and then I go and take my 5 minutes. I've got my, you know, a quick little guided meditation that I listen to. I might do some chakra stirring meditation, listen to certain songs that I know will, you know, bring my mood up, you know, things like that. So I do have like this kind of list of like my go-to tools that I use. But I think that with, when I start the actual like questioning process, like actually having that conversation, then I think I use a few different ones, because there, you know, when you're dealing with Socratic questions, there's quite a few different ones. A lot of them are, there's clarification questions. There's questions about your questions about consequences, you know, what will this bring? So, you know, for example, like clarification questions would be more like, one of the things I ask is, what did I mean by that? You know, let me clarify. What did you mean by that? What are we meaning by this? What are we trying to do with it? You know, really trying to clarify where we're going or what we're looking for first, you know. Then if you want to get into like consequences, you know, then okay, well, if I formulate this and I try something new, what are some of the outcomes I might receive, and would those outcomes work? You know, would those be something that would be beneficial and fulfilling, or something that could backfire? You know, so really getting into those, you know, making sure that you're really probing the possibilities of what you're exploring in there.
Absolutely.
There's also, you know, questions of reason or evidence, ones that are kind of more like, you know, are there enough reasons for what I'm feeling right now? Is there a reason for what I'm feeling right now? Trying to figure out, you know, why am I going on this track? Do I have reasons to be on this current track? You know, are the reasons meaningful enough to stay here? Or could I invent new reasons that would take me a different way? There's questions. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think to build on that whole thing is the reason here. When we do discover that it is misplaced or misguided or not in present time, or, you know, I am completely transferring this onto this person or this event or this experience, the art of kind of learning how to ask these essential questions allows us to identify that pretty quickly. And that's a gift, you know, to be able to say,
right.
Ooh, wow, I just about started vomiting on my friend here, or my lover here, or my mom here, and it really was not about this. It's really related to this event over here, or this thing that happened 2 days ago, or this thing I have yet to acknowledge completely.
Right.
So,
yeah.
You know, that's the other thing, too, is it helps us be honest with self.
Yeah.
It helps us be honest with our experience and the different layers of it, which is critical if it really is true an integrated and free-flowing life that we are seeking. And if it's, you know, this is a tool that optimizes relationships, and I think that that's a part of this that is such a jewel too, is, you know, it's not just something that helps us be more at peace, but it's going to help us have bolder, braver, more authentic relationships with the people around us. And what's better than that, you know, especially as we look at those closest to us. If we can communicate with our kids in a way that allows them to feel empowered and safe as we are, and doesn't have any power dynamics at play or any other things going on to the extent possible, it's awesome, because we're going to open them more, we're going to open ourselves more, we're going to have more actual real connection, and that allows things to blossom. You know, and same in our relationships. If we can come from a place of saying, you know, honey, I'm feeling this way and I want to learn more about what's happening here. Here's what's happening for me. And we can approach conversations that way instead of, you know, through the vein of criticism or shaming or I'm not being fed or my needs aren't being met. But we can really come in from a place of compassion and curiosity and try to meet people where they are and be honest about where we are. I mean, that's the ultimate goal here, right?
Yeah. I think what's cool about essential questions like this, though, too, is that, like you said, the more you explore yourself and the more that you have these questions kind of in your toolbox to utilize for you, it's something that you can then take out and help others explore as well, and even find out different things. You know, like you said, if you're in the middle of an argument, I remember seeing this poster about, I don't even remember, it was like 20 years ago, probably in someone's dorm room or something, and it was kind of a Buddha poster, and I don't know if it was a Buddhist quote or not, but it just said, seek first to understand. And, you know, that's what these essential questions do, both within and for others. You know, that instead of always giving your point of view first, seek first to understand theirs, you know, and actually getting their perspective. You know, why do you have that perspective? Is there another way of really looking at that, you know, or even assuming things? You know, why did I assume that about you? What are you assuming about me? Why are we having these assumptions about this when we're not really seeing another perspective? You know, another thing I just saw the other day online, it was just, you know, it was fun, but you could argue all day about various perspectives. You know, if you're standing at one side of a 6 and I'm standing at the opposite side, I'm going to repeatedly argue with you that it's a 9, you know? And so it really just depends on where you're standing, and these types of questions, these essential questions like this, actually force you to kind of look within and go, is there another way of viewing this? And then now let me take it out and find out, is there another way that you're viewing this? And what is that view? You know, and kind of just open it up. You still can, you know, the wonderful thing is that, especially when having these questions in a conversation, at the end you can still agree to disagree.
Yeah.
You know? But at least then you've kind of, that's true. We'll have another topic on that. Yeah. But yeah, you can definitely still agree to disagree, and at the same time go, however, if I were in your shoes, I can see how you would have seen it that way.
Yeah.
You know? It didn't, you know, that wasn't my intention. It didn't happen for me like that. You know, and it gives way for an apology to actually be able to assume the responsibility so that both can be fulfilled, you know, to really give that, you know, I really apologize for how this went down, you know, I'm sorry for the miscommunication or whatever it was, and in the future I will reach out to you to gain your perspective. I might not agree with, you know, the ultimate decision on things, but I will at least give you the opportunity to really sit and question with you and try to understand versus jump to my own assumption and then label you as that, you know, or leave you in that space. Because in the end, it really is just all about being able to connect, you know. I mean, that's really what we want. We want connection within and connection without.
So as we are, you know, talking about the art of inquiry in general, I mean, that's what our whole show is about each week, is learning how to develop this art, this craft of curiosity, really. I mean, and there's so many different ways that we can delve into that.
Right.
But I think really, you know, as we're sitting here, right now, I would encourage folks to just grab a piece of paper and just write down a few things. You know, what are three things you are most curious about yourself? You know, is it,
right.
Are you, you know, what are three things that are reoccurring in your life? Is it
right.
that you
that's a huge one.
Are explosive? Is it that you have a hard time being honest when you are afraid? You know, what are the three patterns of behavior that you regularly run up against? Like, that would be an awesome thing for you to explore.
Right. Who do you attract? And why?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different curiosities, essential questions that you can ask yourself. But the fundamental thing, you know, I think if we are really seeking breakthrough, if we are really seeking to transcend some of the spaces and evolve into the next level of whoever we can become, who we want to become, we really have to look at those things that we continuously experience in ourselves and that we also receive as reflections from others, you know?
Yeah. That, and I think we also, I think we also have to really work on putting, you know, judgment on the back burner, you know, and that's why, like I said, that is why my personal go-to is this working or not? Because instead of it saying, is this right or is this wrong, it comes down to, is this working? You know, if it's not working, then I need to place something else. Judgment happens anyway, you know, like we are beings and there's judgment built into our system. So, but it really is trying to take the judgment and place it on the back burner and ask a different question first, such as is this working, or, you know, or do I need to course correct, you know, things like that. So rather than just all of a sudden going, oh, something happened and it was bad and it was wrong and what am I going to do? And then get into this whole, you know, either toxic shame or toxic blame, either one, you know, and really sit back and keep the judgment on the back burner. And then we can look at it after we've gone through some of these essential questions and then come back and say, okay, you know, that's not working for me. It's not necessarily always bad on its own, but it doesn't make me feel good. You know, I feel, you know, dirty or bothered inside or bad, you know, kind of a thing. And to kind of put that judgment on the back end and first review these questions first.
Well, and I think something really important to really kind of add to the conversation too is the use of humor to explore these things. I mean, I remember when I got to the point where I was ready to just laugh at some of the, like, ridiculous behaviors I had.
Yeah, it is funny. When you get into those questions and you explore that vulnerability, it's funny how humorous it becomes. Just to be like, oh my gosh, like that's so human of me, you know, and just be able to laugh at it and also be able to see that in other people and relieve that in them and say, you know what, it's okay. It's something that we do and it's part of our system.
Indeed, it absolutely is. I mean, it's just part of the design and it's part of learning and growing. And I mean, for a while, when I really started to dig in to my journey of self-exploration, like focused, dedicated, like this is a part of my life. You know, I really had to come to terms head on with little Lindsay, as I ended up just calling her.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have, many of us have had some version of childhood trauma and some version of young adolescent experience that really knocked us on our heels or put us into these positions and situations and interactions that caused rift in the fabric of our psyche, if you will. And so when I really started to go into this next layer of evolution for myself, it was little Lindsay that I was regularly contending with. And so when I was able to just kind of like name her, recognize she was very much still a part of it. And, you know, all the inner child work, everyone is at this point probably pretty familiar with it. But it's so critical. You know, it was so helpful to me to be able to just be like, what's up, Lil Lindsay? How you doing in there? You feeling a little scared, a little nervous? You know, and then I could kind of talk with her, and I could be kind of playful, and sometimes just, you know, come over here, sit on my lap, let's get through this, but you're being kind of an idiot. You know, and after conversations, especially in, you know, partnership, let's just talk about the most real place that most of it comes up. It's usually in our relationships with our parents and our relationship with our intimate partners.
And partners, yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You know, those are our core guiding relationships. But, you know, I would have some interesting, you know, little kind of like dog and cat fights with partners or whatever, and then I'm walking away and I'm just like laughing at myself. I'm like, what the hell was that? I'm like, you just totally hijacked.
You just needed the control.
Like,
she just needed to take over.
Excited. I did not ask you to be here. You need to get out of here. What do we need to talk about so that you don't show up like that again? You know? And then you can kind of laugh about it. And then that also gives you a guiding point for when you come back into space with your partner to be like, all right, that was my first time. So I apologize. We were throwing a tantrum.
Right. That laughter
needed love or whatever.
Right. That laughter is so important too, because that is how we get to the place of forgiveness. And I have not named mine Little Adrian. I might consider it now, but you know, it is nice to kind of put that separation there, because it's so much easier for us to forgive others than it is to forgive ourselves. And most of the time, when we're in a place where we've reacted in a way that we didn't want to, it typically is because of that little ungrown emotional spirit that you know was first born into the body. Like, you know, what am I doing here? What is all of this kind of thing that's kind of coming back? And when you can separate that out, then it becomes almost easier sometimes to forgive and go, you know what, I forgive you. I forgive you for taking that on and believing that was true at that point in life, because now grown, I realize it isn't true, you know. And that, you know, that's why parents are always like, oh, you're gonna, you know, you'll understand when you have kids, you know, things like that, even because when you grow and you have kids, or even when you're just growing, you realize, you know, you've outgrown your own stupidity on that kind of level. It's kind of like, oh man, my parents were doing what they thought was right at the time, you know, or my parents were dealing with their own thing, and I can see that clearly now, and I couldn't see it then. And so to separate that inner voice, like you were saying, is kind of might be an easier access to forgiving it, and then finding the humor in it, and then realizing, but I'm the grown adult and I'm the one in charge. Yeah. You know?
Absolutely.
So I think I think that
and this has me scribbling down stuff for future topics on future shows, but I think absolutely diving into the effects of trauma on the psyche is going to be something that we need to talk about on a future episode, because it's a very real thing, the rifts and the layers that it creates in our mind, and our ability to cope with things, and our ability to respond to things, and the ways that it stunts our growth as humans, and the fracturing and the fragmentation that is caused through traumatic experience. And you know, and that's a whole world. I mean, we can spend days talking about that. So future shows certainly, but you know, and this is something important for people who are listening to also hear. If you, as you are unraveling and as you are asking these questions, if you are running into trauma, or you are getting to a place where you realize, wow, there's some deep wounding here, or there's some very serious rifts that I'm having a hard time leaping across, you know, there's this great chasm and I just don't know how to get to the other side, no matter how curious I get about it. You know, there's awesome support systems out there. You know, I had
we're one of them.
We absolutely are. One of my dear friends in Salt Lake is a naturopath, and he and his wife always say, you gotta have your pit crew. You know, every single person on this planet needs their pit crew. You just can't do this life alone. So as you're exploring, you know, if you do get to a place where you're like, all right, I need someone else to talk about. And there are so many ways to be in therapy. You know, there's talk therapy, there's energy therapy, there's vocal therapy, there's dance therapy, there's somatic therapy. I mean, there are so many ways that you can start to work with this stuff. And,
and work with us.
Work with us. And, you know, I did EMDR for some childhood trauma that I had, and I thought that was phenomenal too. So, you know, there's a lot of methods out there that can really support people in merging the risks in our mind.
Yeah, and there's also so much, I mean, especially with the internet, I mean, there's so much on there. I did EMDR as well. I honestly, though, did not do it with a counselor. It was something that I went and discovered, and then had a soundtrack that kind of did it, where it just played sounds in either ear, and it kind of forced the EMDR. And it was so nice because it wasn't even something that still worked without me having to. I know that in EMDR practice a lot of times they'll do it. What is it? Tell me what it stands for again.
I
don't remember. But either way, what it is where your eyes bounce back and forth. And a lot of times, you know, I was reading about it that a therapist will do it where they'll wave your finger in front of your eyes, kind of like almost like hypnosis in a way, you know, or like the cliche hypnosis of a TikTok kind of thing.
3 methods. So it's just and we'll just give you a little very amateur. We are
very amateur.
This is my personal experience, what I've read about it, and Adrian's experience with it. So we are not in any way claiming to be experts on this.
No,
but
not at all.
The way my therapist at the time explained it to me was that essentially, what trauma does is it activates the fight or flight that we're all familiar with, and it kicks different chemicals and hormones, and everything in our body is activated at a different temperature and different level. And so these events that occur while our body is in that state, in the mind, is like a thorn, because our body is not in homeostasis. It's not in that normal everyday processing system. So we get these thorns in our mind because it was out of whack, and it was doing what it needed to do to survive in that moment. But then when it goes back to homeostasis, we still have this chemical event that occurred in the brain that created this rut or this neural pathway. And so it holds it there and doesn't really know how to drop it. And so EMDR, essentially what it does, so at the end of every day, we're talking about on a normal day, our subconscious and conscious mind alike is taking in all the information, you know, the senses, the sights, the sounds, the memories, the feelings, everything about our day. And it's our central processing unit, right, our brain. And so at night, the reason sleep is so critical to humans' ability to function well is because at night, our central processing unit then goes to sleep and we hit REM. And the reason REM sleep is so important is because it kind of sifts out all of the events and clears our hard drive, if you will, and resets so that the next day we can input more information. So what does not occur with trauma events is they don't go through that sifting process because they aren't in the kind of main memory soup part of it. They stay in their own little orbit in the mind. And so EMDR activates a REM state in the brain, and it can be done. I actually did paddles that vibrated back and forth. So you can also do the visual one, and then there's also an auditory one that was like boo, 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 boo.
Right. Yeah.
I chose the vibrating paddles back and forth, and either way, it's stimulating the right and left hemispheres of the brain back and forth, which triggers that REM state.
Right.
And then essentially, it's a reprocessing of the memory. So EMDR is a very intense process. It's absolutely, you have to be in a space where you feel courageous enough and able enough to confront the memory as much as you can, because it is a reprocessing of it while activating your brain so that you can pull it out, if you will, and drop it down through that REM state into the rest of the part of your memory. So in that way, it's kind of a fascinating thing, and it can be for me, it ended up being, in the beginning, I'm not going to lie, I had my first anxiety attack. I didn't even know what it was, but when I was going through that initial process, I was sitting in a board meeting at my work, and all of a sudden, my whole body got flooded. My session was like the day before, but all of a sudden, my cells had released all of that trauma.
Right.
And 24 hours later, it came up, and my whole body was just in panic. They even called wanted to call the ambulance, and I was like, no, I think I just need to go call my therapist. Pretty sure I need to call my therapist. I'm going through some new trauma therapy. And, I was sitting in a room of social workers, so everybody understood. They're like, oh, yeah, we'll call your therapist.
Right.
But, I mean, it's intense. I have to go back and you have to confront those memories, and you have to
now, did you
process it.
When you were doing it, because like I said, I did not do it with a counselor. I did mine completely auditory, and I actually just found some things on YouTube or something. I know that in practice a lot of times they'll do that where they create the REM, but at the same time you're actually talking about your trauma. Is that what you did to process?
Yes, more or less.
Okay.
So we would I would go in and go out, go in and go out.
Okay.
For some people,
because I found the same thing happen to me, but I wasn't actually speaking it. I would actually just lie there in my room and relax on my bed, and it would just kind of like my eyes would start crying. I would just it would bring it up, and it would kind of process and everything, and then my eyes would water, and it was for me, it was really relaxing. And I did that, I added that to my ritual for a while. But I didn't end up having to verbally rehash what I had been through. It was more like it kind of mentally was rehashing while that process was going on.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So.
Yeah, mine was where, I would go in and I would reprocess, and then whatever came up, I'd kind of come out, and she'd turn the paddles off, and she'd just say, okay, what appeared. But it was more like a deeply meditative state where I was doing the work with myself. She was facilitating it and guiding it, but I wasn't talking through it aside from when the paddles would come off, and she'd just say, okay. And then we'd kind of figure out where we needed to go next. And then I'd go back in and kind of do that visualization or that meditation. So it was really interesting. That's where little Lindsay actually came out. And that was back in 2011. She kept coming up, and she showed me quite a lot. And, I think I'll save that story for another one of our episodes because it's pretty poignant. But it was intense. But I can tell you, I had insomnia most of my life until I did the EMDR. And I remember the first session that I came back to her after having had however many I had. But I said, holy cow. I was like, Jody, I slept all night. I actually slept all night. I don't remember the last time in my entire existence that occurred. I mean, it had started in elementary, this insomnia. My mom used to joke that I was a vampire. So, to have like a day where I went to bed and then I woke up and it was the morning, I mean, that was a holy miracle for me. I couldn't believe it. And there was a stillness that came, and there's so much we'll get into in future episodes, because again, I'm like, once I start to dive into this whole 2011 to about 2015, like the amount of unbelievable, mind-blowing, earth-shattering, breaking open experiences I had were many and phenomenal, and I just had so many things that were bigger than me and not even remotely ordinary occurred during that period of my life. That's 12 other episodes, and we'll get to all those things later. I'm sure those stories will emerge as it's
that's why we're doing it.
Indeed, that's why we're here, sharing stories. And on that note, we should probably wrap up this week's official questions. We kind of went into some new spaces and maybe foreshadowed what we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks. So, yes, thank you everyone for tuning in. And I guess what we really want to leave you with today more than anything is the power of curiosity as you meet yourself in your daily life. And the more comfortable you can get with asking yourself what
questions,
what is going on, and what is this related to, and what do I need to do here? And as Adrienne said, is this working? You know, do I like this? Does this bring me joy? Is this the right choice? And I'm just going to insert this really quickly because sometimes I think, there's that new term kind of going around the last couple of years of spiritual bypassing. This is not in any way us encouraging that, and I want to acknowledge anyone on here who is a victim of trauma or abuse or in an actual abusive environment right now. This is not questioning that I know for some people may feel impossible as we are talking about these things. It sounds so casual. But having been in places, aforementioned places, I can tell you that these are the things, the life-sustaining questions, the places that you have to start before you can activate. And you will activate, and you will get there, and you will make choices as it's time to make choices, and as you are safe to make choices. But it is okay to start here, and it isn't impossible to get through and out into the other side of whatever places you may be in your life right now, whatever points of contention you are experiencing.
And keep it simple and keep listening, because you will hear a repeat answer until you are able to actually make the choice and take the action.
Yeah, the good old knock 3 times or 10 or 12,
right?
It may take however many times
it might take,
and that is so okay. And to kind of close with Adrienne's reminder about judgment, this is the process of self-discovery is so multifaceted, and it's so cyclical, and it's absolutely a spiral, descending and ascending, depending on the day and the event. So, compassion for self and compassion for others, and patience, and do not judge the process or feel like you need to be somewhere at a certain amount of time or day.
Radical acceptance.
Radical acceptance.
Absolutely. What's now, where you are. So, well, thank you, Lindsay, for being with you again. I appreciate it. And we will see you guys next week.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Bye.